All right, Grandpa.
Wow.
So I don't really know where I want to go with this or anything.
No, I don't know anything.
I don't really know either. But I just all the aunts and uncles asked me since this summer I have this video camera. To have you tell your life story so we can get some of these things down on video.
Okay.
So forever and ever. So I can pass them on to my kids.
All right. Well, I
And
will
say, this is the man
I'll tell
responsible
you
for everything.
what I know. I was born by immigrant parents and loving parents, and although, unfortunately, I love my mother and father, but my father left when I was 2, and there were some problems, and I don't know what they were. I was only 2, 3 years old, and but anyway, my father was a baker, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom until my dad left, and then she went to work in the sweatshops, the garment district on Washington Avenue. That's where most of the immigrants worked because they knew how to sew and do whatever. My father was a baker. And I had one sister. She's 4 years older than I am. We were never close because, we were a brother and sister, and we loved each other, but we didn't have a lot in common. She was kind of goody two shoes. She was always the smartest in her class in grade school and in high school, and I was close to the top, but just a little notch under the top. And but I wouldn't trade my youth and childhood for anything. I spent a lot of time on the streets with older kids, and they taught me some things, and some things I learned on my own. But God was with me, and He took care of me. And I always thought, God was going to zap me because I did a few things wrong. And I was always like, out of the dark shadows, that He was going to come down and really get me, So I lived with that for a lot of years, and it was nothing, bad or vicious, but it was street stuff, and
So where'd you live? Where?
I lived on 10th Street, 2716 South 10th Street. It was between just 4 doors down, 5 doors down from Anheuser-Busch, and so I thought until I was 19 years old and left St. Louis, that I thought the whole world smelled like the brewery, because in those days there was a lot of hops and yeast in the air and so forth, and they had the Clydesdales over there, and that's where I used to hang out a little bit in the coal yards, kind of helping myself to some coal, and we started a little coal business because everybody had a little coal stove. That was my first job, and selling a little bit of bucket of coal and then some kindling wood to old ladies up on the 2nd, 3rd floor. And anyway, we made a few bucks, and I went to the Assumption School. My mother was not. My father was the Catholic faith, and from Germany, and my mother just didn't go to any church, but just kind of went to some churches with her girlfriends before they got married, but took 2 or 3 instructions from an old senile priest, Father Shea, but she made a vow to raise us Catholic, and when my father left, she continued that vow and put us in the Assumption School. It's the Assumption on 9th and Sydney. It's called the Assumption of the BVM, Blessed Virgin Mary, not to be confused with the Assumption in Matisse.
I like that, the BVM.
The BVM,
That's
Blessed
quick.
Virgin Mary. So school and church was a big part of my life. There was only 4 boys in my class, so with the St. Joe nuns, we really couldn't get by with much. If you weren't prepared, you got caught, and I frequently got caught.
What would you get caught doing?
Well, like if you didn't do your assignment, or you didn't do your homework right, and you were trying to slough off, or sometimes in a large class, you hope that the nun doesn't call on you. You might slip by a class, but with only 11 in my class, we were under the gun frequently. So, and I wasn't a bad student, and always perfect in conduct, though. I always got.
I bet.
I didn't do so well there at times, but at times I did. And the nuns liked me, and we didn't have janitors, so I become. Well, when one of the little kids would throw up, I'd have to go down to the boys' room downstairs to clean it up, and And I did start puffing some cigarettes in about the 7th or 8th grade. So one time I was up down there cleaning up some little kid's puke, and I lit up a cigarette, but the floors were so old that the smoke went into the 8th grade classroom, and I got busted, of course, and that was not a happy thing. But I survived, and then I got a job selling Purity box lunches in the morning. I made a quarter before I went to mass every morning. And then I worked at a little grocery store delivering groceries. So you could always earn $1 somewhere. $1 was a lot of money, but a quarter, a dime.
Didn't your family sell papers?
Yeah, when my father left, we needed to supplement some income. So my mother, my sister, and I all started selling papers. I sold every day. I had a stand at the American Car Foundry down on 2nd and DeKalb Street, and so I'd make 35, 40 cents a day plus another 2 bits in the morning selling box lunches by the time I was 8, 9 years old. So I had some income, and then we got a paper route, and my mother put me in dancing school, so I took tap and ballet for about 4, 5, 6 years. I had to try out for the Muni, but
You tried out for the Muni?
well, Babes in Toyland. I literally danced and I got picked, but I had long banana curls, and they thought I was the girls. And then when they found out I was the boy, I made it by dancing, but then when they found out I was a boy and not a girl, I got kicked out. And
Norbert Butz?
yeah, no, no, that's not where the name Norberta comes from at all. And believe me, I was all boy. Yeah, you just have to take my word on that.
Hold on, Grandpa. I gotta change the battery.
But I did. We sold papers for a number of years, and my sister had a route, and I had a route, and my mother had a route. And then we would meet at 10 o'clock because I had to get my sister off the street, and my mother kept increasing the number of papers every week. So, and she never believed in turning a paper in, taking it back. So I would meet them, and then I would head down to Broadway in Arsenal and work my way about halfway downtown. And I could do the soft shoe and I could hoof. So I'd go into taverns and I'd put on a little dance routine and try to hustle some papers so I could sell out and go home. I'd like to get home by midnight or so. And then I had an Uncle Fred who liked to sport the taverns down there, and there was an Indian, a Wahoo Indian, and who lived with him. His name was Oscar, and he liked to drink too. So I knew if I could find a tavern that Fred or Oscar was in, and I went and did my little routine, they would make everybody in the tavern sell me out so I could go home. I'd sell all my papers, even though they had a paper ready, they had to buy another one. So anyway, but papers, we become very good at it, and the routes kept growing, and then I would go back on Sunday morning to collect for the people that we left the papers at the door. But we had to go into a lot of tenement, second and third floor, back alleys and scare hallways. So I was attempted robbery 3 times before I was 12, 13 years old. And one time I had a knife put in my back and punctured me a little bit. And then another time they pulled a gun and they held it, just inches from my nose, and it was a real gun. And I was scared, and I wouldn't give my money, but they never got my money because I knew I couldn't go home without my money. And so the guy with the knife, I just started yelling so loud that people on the street heard me and happened to come back, and the guy ran, but he did puncture me a little bit, but didn't stick the knife all the way in me, just broke a little bit of skin. And then the guy with the gun backed off, and he says, if you don't give me your money when I count to 3, there were some other guys around him though, he said, when I count to 3, I'm going to shoot. And my knees were shaking, and when he said 3, he didn't shoot, but someone had a garbage lid and made a big bang with the garbage lid, and I thought, this is it, God. You can zap me now, all the little things I did. And I remember I started shaking, and I just slid down the wall, and I was shaking so bad because I didn't feel no pain, but I thought I was shot. And so finally, one of the older guys in the gang took pity on me and called the guys off, and they didn't rob me, but I just stood there and shook. And the other time I got called back in an alley, and they threw a blanket over me, and they hit me with 2x4s, but the blanket was heavy enough that there was glancing blows. So 3 times I was down at the Lynch Street Police Station, and so finally they says, we think you ought to give it up, you know, I mean, because the streets were a little dangerous. But, you know, God always protected me, and I think the thing that I want to say about my youth is that all that I've seen and explored, and the fights in the alleys and this and that and the other thing, from a very young boy, God, for whatever reason, I always felt that He favored me. You know, but He favors everybody, but I acknowledge that He favored me, and because He would lead me to the brink. I'd go to the brink, but I'd never cross, you know, the line. You know, there's a line you can't cross, and I could never cross that line. And I know now, as I got older, that was, you know, God just holding me back and saying, hey, that's as far as you can go. Don't go no further. You know, don't quite do the next step, you know. And because some of the guys did get in trouble and that type thing. Well, that kind of brought me till I was 14 years old, and I was pretty popular in my class, I think. And
well, we got to tell the story about what happened to the locks.
The what?
The beautiful Shirley Temple curls.
Oh, well, one of my problems, and the reason that fighting become almost a daily issue, was that in those days, because of lice and because of, you know, cooties and all that other stuff, everybody had butch cuts. I mean, they had like the Marine Corps, you know, no hair. And my mother, for whatever reason, always never gave me a haircut till I was 5, 6 years old. So I had blonde hair that she literally put up in ringlets, in curls, and put bobby pins in them. So, you know, when you're a kid on the street, and you know, you know, the guys want to whatever. So I got whipped a lot. I got beat up a lot. I went home crying a lot until one day I picked up an equalizer, a shoe, and I whipped an older kid that was beating the heck out of me. But I used a shoe, and I always I'm not proud of that, but the shoe really helped. I mean, it was the equalizer I needed because he was going to really whip me. And but anyway, I survived all that, and my father, when I was about 5 or 6, got me my first haircut. So you can remember, you know, my hair was long. It was way down, you know, past my shoulders. But she always kept it. My mother always kept it bobbed up. Now she died, and my mother had a tough life, and I survived all this, and I never held it against her. She must have had her reasons, which I never felt she owed me an explanation. But my father one Saturday took me to a barber shop down on Broadway and gave me a double dip ice cream cone. And for a double dip ice cream cone, I'd pretty well do anything. And I sat in his barber chair, and he gave me a
big ass ice cream cone.
Yeah, big ass ice cream cone. He gave me a buzz job. And I remember I was bald. I mean, just literally bald from this golden blonde hair in ringlets and curls with bobby pins. I'm shaved bald. And my dad was afraid to take me home because, needless to say, things were not, they were estranged. And so he had my Uncle Fred take me home. And I remember my mother was ironing, and there was no heating or air conditioning or whatever. And she was ironing, and it was hot. And anyway, she screamed when she saw me, and you know, and she says to Uncle Fred, who did this? And my dad's name was Dutch. He was Dutch, and I was Little Dutch, Big Dutch, Little Dutch. And I remember she screamed, and the iron came through the screen door, and my Uncle Fred ducked, and the iron hit the bricks over his head, and he left me there, and he ran and never came back. He never came back to our house ever since then. And I'll never forget that because I was like, wow. And but I remember the ice cream cone. And I was scared too, but I remember my mother was irate. She was almost crazy, and I had no idea where I was at. And I knew it was on Broadway, and I remember her taking me down, dragging me down, and we had to go in every barber shop from like Arsenal Street to damn near, you know, almost to Shoto Avenue, until we found the right barber shop, and we walked in, and here the barber must have been cutting a lot of nappy hair because there was a lot of hair on the floor, and you could see my golden curls in with all this nappy hair. And I remember she went in and she made that barber get down on his hands and knees and pick my curls up out of this. I mean, I must have had nice hair. I don't know.
Well, look at your hair now.
Yeah, well, whatever. At least I got hair. That's most people I know in the family don't have hair, so including some of my sons. And so, anyway, that was her deal, and I remember it was quite a thing in my life. But got over that, and then I got another haircut about 2 years later. So then it was just grown to where I would kind of blend in a little bit. And then I got older, and I said, no, I'm going to get my hair cut, Yeah. And so that was kind of it. And then, but my mother, in her wise wisdom, decided that I really needed some serious discipline. And so from our neighborhood on 10th Street, nobody went to CBC. But she happened to see a young man in a CBC uniform and was impressed. So she took me out to the Christian Brothers out on Clayton Road, which is 3 buses to get to school. You had to leave 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, walk to the bus stop. A lot of people had to do that. Nobody had cars in those days. But, and I got to CBC, and she enrolled me there and begged the brothers to take me, and they did. And I had a little bit of a problem there my first year. I got into a couple fist fights with students, and then I had 2 brothers just knocked me, harder than I've ever been hit in my life.
The brothers?
Oh, yeah. Because I said something in class I shouldn't have. And one brother had something published. He was my English teacher, Brother Raymond, and he put me in the first row because of conduct, and he was talking about something that he wrote, a poem or something. He got it published, and as soon as he got done reading it, I said to him, "Oh, aren't you great?" Well, I know where that got that out of my mouth, and he hit me with his fist so hard, my nose bled, my mouth was split open, and I was knocked out of my chair. And then I had one other occurrence shortly after that where brother really popped me good. So I said, man, this is for real. These guys, sometimes you think something, but you can't whip everybody. These guys are tough, and they don't hold back from hitting you. And so, but I needed it, and I deserved it, and I thought it was fair. Today there'd be a lawsuit over it, but I had a smart mouth, and I was the price you paid for a smart mouth. But then from then, I really didn't ever take the military because I flunked 16 straight semesters, and I went to a military school without getting a military diploma.
So what rank did you graduate with?
A private. There was 164 in our class, and there was 8 privates, and I was one of the privates.
And what kind of gun did you have?
I had when I was a freshman, I got on a rifle range, and I wasn't a shooter, but instead of shooting at the target, I shot a light bulb out. So I was banned from any weapons in the armory for my entire career at CBC. And when you're a freshman, you got to carry a wooden rifle. But my punishment was I had to carry a wooden rifle almost all 4 years, and then we would switch off with a freshman. But anyway, CBC was great, though. The thing that I admire most about CBC is they had discipline, and they had rules and regulations. And when you didn't follow them, there was consequences. There was consequences. It's not like, I got by with everything. I got by with a lot, but I also paid a lot of consequences. And consequences were a demerit. In other words, if your shoes weren't shined right, or you didn't have your tie just right, or you were late, you got a demerit. And demerit was a half hour of work. And I used to get pretty many demerits. A lot of demerits. And but I got into a couple fights in my freshman year, and I went out for football, and I never could quite understand that. When a guy was a bully, and I hate bullies. I hate bullies. I would fight anybody that was picking on somebody, and because I was pretty good at it, and I knew I could probably whip them. But on the same token, they could be bigger than anything else, but they didn't fight as much as I did on the streets. So, there's an advantage of guys talking about fighting and guys that did a lot of it. So we, I don't want to go on and on with that, but because I was a good guy. But what I liked about football is you could go out there and knock someone silly, and you get a pat on the ass and they say good job. Someone else can deserve a little bit of a hit. You hit them at a military school, and you got all kinds. You hit them with your fist or slap them, you got all kinds of trouble. And so I thought, well, football's for me. That's a sport that and so I played 4 years, and I loved it. I love football, and then our athletic director was a great Christian brother. He had problems in his life too. He took to drink and became an alcoholic, and later on he sold grades for booze. But God spared him and took that thing from him. But he was from Chicago, and Brother Hermes Lynch, and he was a Chicago tough guy with a brother with a Latino heart, but anyway, he used to want to keep me in school. The military wanted me out of school, and so he helped me with my demerits. I kind of worked for him, but in a half hour, if you got 8 demerits, that's 4 hours work. There wasn't enough hours in a day, so he made me work like a half hour, and I'd take care of all 8 demerits. So I kind of had it in that I could work around these demerits and say, okay, lay it on me if you have to, because I wasn't worried about it.
So when you were in high school, did you still hang out with all the kids in the old neighborhood? Is that who you?
Yeah, but I was going into my junior year, and I had to go through the alleys and take my uniform off before I could go back on the street. Because
just didn't mix like that.
Yeah, well, because the kids in the neighborhood, most of them didn't go to school. When they turned 16, they went to work right away on the docks down on Broadway or shipping yards or something, or Gaylord Container or whatever. They just took menial jobs. And so with me going to CBC, a military school, hotsy-totsy, whatever, I couldn't really, be part of the street guys and still have the uniform on. So I used to have to come home, sneak it off. Now when I got to be a junior, senior, I got bigger and more physical. And then, these guys all went off to reform school or somewhere. They did something with their lives, and then I could go on the street with my uniform.
But you had good friends from the old neighborhood, that's.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about
most
that.
of them are dead. Like on our block, there was about 8 of us on our block, and I think 7 out of the 8 went to the Marine Corps. It was like a thing to do, we had the mentality for it and the background for it. So and a guy, John Saliga, who is a good dear friend of mine now, lives back here in St. Louis, was the first one, and we all followed his. His name was Sluggo. He's 4 years older than I am, and even with my curls, and he used to stick up for me, and he was not a brutal guy. He was fair and he was tough, and so if kids from out of the neighborhood come on and picked on me, or some of the little kids, they had to face John and Sluggo, and that pretty well ended things, or they were in it in a hurry,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to make more of that, because also church was a very, very important thing in my life. I had to serve mass all the time, because there's only 4 boys, and 40 hours in devotions, and I sang in the choir, and before I smoked 40,000 million cigarettes, I used to sing a little bit. Not very good, but I want to get back to this dancing school. At dancing school, I was the only boy in the class, and all these mothers would come with their pretty little girls with their little ringlets and their little tutus and all that. And they needed an adagio team. An adagio team is in ballet. Ballet was never my favorite because, but anyway, that's when they take a couple little boop, 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 and they jump up in your arms, and you got to twirl them around or, twist them around a little bit. And so I dropped a couple of them, you would. And their mothers would after me, with their umbrellas, hey, will you drop my daughter? And then I got tired of that, and then two of them had a little beefy, and I said, well, if you get her to lose some weight, I wouldn't drop her. Well, that didn't go over too good with a couple of moms, so that Adagio team, I think we disbanded it after about 2-3 months. I remember that, getting in trouble in dance class for dropping these little big girls. But anyway, then, and the amazing thing about CBC, I got to take up with Brother Hermes later on in life, and we become, and when he died, I went to Glencoe where the brothers are, and I was part of his funeral service and did a talk about Brother Hermes, because he could, and the amazing thing about Brother Hermes and a couple of brothers, Brother George, was that they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. You know what I mean? They saw something that I couldn't see yet, you know, but because I was a good guy. I mean, I didn't do really mean bad things and destroy.
You just had a rough beginning.
Well, whatever. But it was a good beginning, and it was one that that I have no regrets. I have no regrets about any of it. You know, the long hair, being picked on, running home crying, because after a while you get beat up enough, then you start getting better at what you do, and you can start beating up some people, you know. But anyway, and that's not a good thing either. Fighting is never a good way. But then the amazing thing now, it's the guns and the knives, and people are out to kill people.
Yeah, it's not just your fist.
Then we would just fight. If a kid's nose start bleeding or his lips start bleeding, or a little bitty cut, I mean, that was the end of it. You know, there was a winner or loser at that time, and it wasn't the vicious stuff that you see now. So I don't want to overplay that street stuff, because it would be child's play compared to what's going on in modern time with kids just getting shot for no reason, just standing on a playing, doing skip rope or something. We never had that. Never, ever, ever.
It was just kind of a little rough and a little bit of respect thing.
Yeah, and we were respectful to certainly seniors and mothers and dads that were there, and old ladies. We would carry their groceries and help them up the steps. I mean, we just did stuff like that, and
Isn't that how you met a certain someone?
Well, yeah, and then I got to be 16 years old, and things were going pretty good. I was a fairly good athlete, although you got to be careful when you say you were a good athlete when you were a kid, because it seems to me that people I know, the older they got, the better they got, and there's always, no matter what you do, there's always someone that can beat you, whip you, do better, sell more, jump higher, jump lower, whatever, well, I don't know, jump lower. It's just an expression of
There's always someone else out there.
Yeah, so and I think one of the main things that I had to learn is that you can just be who you are, be all you can be.
In the Army.
Yeah.
No.
I don't like to use an Army
in the Marines.
But and then you got to join the world. You can't fight the world, because you have to be part of it rather than be.
Were you fighting it for?
So independent, huh?
Were you fighting it?
Well, I think so. I was fighting home life. I was fighting living in a house of women. My grandmother, my aunt, my mother, my sister.
That's all you lived with? Was just.
Yeah, I never had a male in my
Because didn't your grandpa pass away when you were
life?
little?
Yeah, my grandpa. God, I was really young in grade school, and he was my great guy. He was a shoemaker, and we had safety zones at the time, waiting for a streetcar, and some driver came and ran him over, and he died about 3 days later. So it was a big loss in my life, because when I'd come home from school, or even before I went to school, or if I had a half day or a day off, I would be with my grandpa all day. He'd be in the basement making shoes. He made them from scratch, and repaired shoes. He's a shoemaker. And then he also did the cooking, so that got me into the kitchen a little bit, and and that's why
Do you make soups?
I like to
You had
make
ham hocks?
and by the way, my ham hock soup, your father ate it for lunch, and he loved it.
Since you're doing this for me, I'll try it for you.
But anyway, and then my mother, God bless her, worked on her feet all day long and got home, and by the time she'd take 2 buses to get home in a streetcar, it'd be late. So I was allowed at a very young age to start supper, like to put the potatoes on, or maybe start simmering the, I mean, I'm talking like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, or start the 2 pork chop or whatever we were having.
So were you and your mom, like, you had like a lot of respect for your mom?
Oh yeah, I mean,
like you weren't, were you close, or was it just kind of like
mother,
a respect thing?
Well, we were close, but my mother, I was like, I was her world, you know, I was her life. And it was a little smothering at times. Like, she liked to dance and I liked to dance, but she would take me to an adult dance club. You know, like the Forest Park Highlands had a open dance floor, or Casa Loma. She liked to dance, but she never ever went on a date or never went on another man. But when I got to be 12, 13, 14 years old, I was her date, you know, at these things. If she'd go to the Muni, I'd be her date. If she took me to the symphony, but she exposed me to, from coming from the street, she exposed me to a lot of culture, you know, and was a very clean living. We've never had alcohol in our house. I died without my mother ever seeing me smoke a cigarette.
Really?
Oh yeah, I would never light up a cigarette in front of my mother. I just wouldn't. I mean, she really sacrificed her whole life for me, and hey, she did some things that I don't quite understand, and why she did them. But she had a tough life, and sending us to school, and then.
Where was she from?
Well, she was born here and raised here, but she was born right after my grandmother got here from Germany, and her sister was born in Germany, but anyway, she was a good mom. Took very good care of us. I never went hungry. My clothes were always clean. She didn't baby us and let us do a lot of our own thing. Now, Grandma Jost, she's a Hungarian boy, tough old Hungarian lady. Now, Grandma and I used to go.
What did you get called as a little kid? Round
and round. Schneetz. She called me Schneetz. You know, for Nitz. They called me Nitz. I don't know how the hell I got the name Nitz. And Nitz is kind of a bugger. It sounds like a bug anyway. Nit.
I think it's like lice.
Yeah, well, a nit. I don't know, but well, she talked very broken. So instead of saying nit, she'd say Schneetz, Schnitz, and Schnitzy boy, she'd yell. And I'd say, Grandma, don't call me that. And everybody laughs, you know. Oh, Schnitz, you come here, you make the steps clean. Come on, you scrub the steps, you. And if you held the broom this way, she said, "No, you hold the broom this way, you goddamn dumb cough," you know. And got Dory and I, and she said, "God, Dory and I, you dumb cough, you hold the broom this way, you hold the broom." I says, "Grandma, as long as I'm sweeping, what the hell difference does it make how I'm holding the broom, you know, or the scrub brush?" But so I had to get I really, I got through CBC, and I had great jobs. I worked at the ballpark from the time I was 13 to 16, or 12 to 16, and then I got a job as an office boy for a company, and then I also was a assistant produce manager at Food Center, which was a chain of food stores, you know.
How old were you when you were doing all this?
When I what?
How old were you when you were doing this?
Well, when I left from 16, that summer on, from 16 to 18, I was worked at Food Center. But I couldn't work there when I was playing football. But that's why I only played one sport. Maybe I wasn't good enough to play anything else, but I needed to get, we always worked.
Were those good jobs for your family? Like, was that pretty substantial?
Yeah, well, it was not the fact that my mother, we got a little support, but my mother took a lot of my earnings, but she never spent them for herself or on herself. She had a blackboard and she'd write it down, and then so often she'd take it to Manufacturers Bank on Broadway. And so I was able, working, to pay, I paid all my tuition through high school, and I went to college for 1 year at St. Louis U and the university, and I paid all my own tuition there. But then I got a job for Mopac Railroad, and I would go to school from 7 to 3, and I had to work from 4 to midnight without a car. I didn't get home to 1:30 in the morning, and I had 7 o'clock classes the next day, and I did that for 1 year. And finally school got out, and I'm walking on Grand Avenue, and there's that picture of that 30-inch broad-shouldered guy, you know, blonde hair, blue-eyed, pointing at me saying, "We want you." And I went in there, I said, "I want you. We want each other, and if you'll get me out of St. Louis in like 2 weeks, I'll join, I'll sign." Thank God I only signed for 3 years and not 4, because I'd signed my life away at the time. But I needed to get out of St. Louis. I needed to get out of my environment.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is that your grandmother, who I was smitten with at age 14, I took her out on my 16th birthday. She was 14, and I saw that gleam in her eye, and I had one too. And she was kind of a rebound situation, which at 14 years old, it's all puppy love stuff. And but anyway, we've been together all those years, and we went study a lot through high school. And she was my gal.
But you went to a lot of other dances and stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, we danced a lot. Our life was, when I was in high school, we had a choir practice every Tuesday night with perpetual help devotions before and after. And then we would walk and get an ice cream with the kids in the neighborhood. And then church was a big thing. We would go to church.
Where'd you go to church at?
It's Assumption, where I went to grade school. Yeah, they happened to move into the neighborhood from another neighborhood, and I met them and met her mother, and I got stood up on my birthday. I wanted to go dancing, and by this Gina Lola Brigida of high school.
The Gina. Who is Gina Lola Brigida?
Yeah, I'll show you a picture of her sometime. You'll know who she is. She would be like, would you say an Italian Dolly Parton? I don't know how else to describe it.
Fully developed.
Well, just the Gina Lola Brigida of high school. But I was involved in football. My mind wasn't there, but anyway, I really enjoyed your mother's company, and we started dating, and we went study after a while, and I think my junior, senior year of high school we went study. And the thing about CBC, we had a brother that ultimately left being a Christian brother, but I loved the guy. I had him for religion, and again, I told you earlier that I always thought that no matter how hard I tried, some things wouldn't go right. You'd screw up, and I always knew that I was going to get zapped for this. I really didn't understand until he explained to me who Jesus was, and that he suffered, he died, he rose, he loved me, just for me. And I thought, well, wow, if he did that just for me and you or everybody, you got to have you got to be important. You're just not something that happened or just random out there, trying to swim across the ocean. That you really had a helper. But it made an impact on me with this brother in religion class, that for the first time, if you confessed and you were truly sorry for any wrongs you did, it was forgiven and forgotten. And it really, I don't know, that was kind of my turning of where, I always believed in God and church and all that, but, God was always way out there, as somebody that, was, I just couldn't. But I learned at about 18 years old that this was a special, and it would become very personal for me. In fact, I get a little choked up when I think about it. But then from there, I went into the Corps, and I thought all of the things I saw in my life was pretty interesting, pretty involved, a little hairy. But what I experienced in there, it was all child's play. It was like a 5-year-old playing soccer against a high schooler.
Before we start the Corps, I have to have 2 stories from high school. I have to have that one where you rolled the girl's head up in the window.
God, I knew that was coming.
And where you stole the tip off the chicken table.
Well,
like
I said,
those aren't even dirty stories.
I love to dance, and if you could dance a little bit, you were a little popular, because a lot of guys were nerds and they just stood there with their hands in their pockets and they talk about the girls and look at them. But if you were a dancer, you could really get them in close and dance with them, and get to know them. So I went to several proms. I mean, more than with Dolly. I went to several, and But Monday was always an issue. I mean, it cost money to go to the prom, and we always were scrolling around that. I went to a prom with, I mean, for the flower. I went to one prom, Hancock's prom. There was only 2 of us in the whole prom that didn't have tuxes on, me and my friend. Everybody else had a white tux with, and we're with suits, and we had like $5, and it come time to go out afterwards, and the pictures were $2 or $3, to have your prom picture taken. And so we were down to like $2 a piece. Tony might have had an extra $1 or so, but he says, what are we going to do? The girls are hungry. They want to go out afterwards. People are talking about going to the Chase and going here and there, and we didn't have, we couldn't go. And we didn't even have enough to really go out and get a hamburger and a Coke. And so where Sam's Steakhouse is now, that used to be a place called Munzer's. And I've been served beer in there at age 6, 17, but not all the time. Sometimes they'd...
Just got a little thirsty.
You'd order a beer and they'd say, you want milk, kid? He'd say, no, make it a Coke, But anyway, this one particular night, we were on our way out. But the problem is we were only sophomores, and we were with senior girls who, they're a little advanced for us a little bit. We could handle most of it, but there were some things that got, anyway.
Hold on again. All right. So you went to Munzer's.
Yeah, so we're, Tony's father had a car, and so we're heading out Gravois, and we're going to Munzer's, and we get in Munzer's, and there was nothing on the menu that the 4 of us could get for $4. We had dates, and we had $2 a piece, and the girls were really hungry, and was really hungry, and they looked at the menu, and one of them says, boy, I'm going to order chicken dinner. And that one chicken dinner, we couldn't pay for it. So the other young lady, Mary Ruth Lippert, ordered a chicken dinner. That was Tony's date. And mine was the Syrian girl that had a little mustache.
She had a little mustache?
Well, you just had a little facial hair up there. What?
How did you meet girls from Hancock?
Well, I'm going to backtrack the story. These 2 girls, I got to get to the Hancock story.
Oh.
This is the 2 girls from Rock. They went to Rock Church. They went to Rock, and they were seniors, and we were sophomores. And Tony liked to dance too. That's why he wanted us to go. And
Tony, who was his last name?
Pardon me?
What was his last name?
Susan. Tony Susan. Yeah, your dad knows him.
Yeah.
And it was a friend of mine I went to CBC with and lived in the old neighborhood. But anyway, I told Tony, he says, what are we going to do? I says, well, hell, let's all eat chicken dinners. So we ordered 4 chicken dinners. And I ordered 2 beers and 2 Cokes, and the waitress looked at me, and she says, Sonny, you want milk or Coke? I got beer in there before, but this time, but you're playing a role. I was 16, and I got big senior girls with us, and I had to play the role a little bit. And so anyway, I don't know, our bill was like $8.80 or $9.20. It was less than $10, and we couldn't pay for it. But the tables, there was a lot of people in there. It was a popular place to go after prom, and they had the tables really close together. So anyway, Tony was really sweating it, and I says, "Don't worry about it. God will provide." Now, I don't mean this blasphemously or be blasphemy, but I actually did say that. I says, "God will do something. It'll work out. Don't worry about it." And I no more said that, and the table next to us got tired of waiting for the waitress to come by, to collect the money, and they put a $10 bill on the table. As soon as I spotted the 10, I knew that my prayer was answered, and I mean, that was no problem at all. I had that 10 in like 30 seconds. Nobody, my girls didn't see it, Tony didn't see it, and I pulled this 10 out, and our bill was like $9.20 or something like that, and our gal came by, and I gave her the 10. I said, and keep the change, big 80-cent tip or whatever. Keep all the change. And so they were impressed. So they were so impressed with us picking up this chicken dinner and all that. And my problem was that on the way, there's a viaduct on Grand Avenue in Afton, on Afton, the viaduct. And this Vicky was over me. He was way too advanced for me. Okay,
the mustache.
Yeah, and wow. And my mistake was kissing her one time going under this bridge, thinking. Anyway, and I mean that just like it was not. We were going to her house. She lived on Lafayette Avenue, big house. It was in St. John, Nipmuc's Parish, and we were going to her house for breakfast, and her parents were there. And so she wanted to show me the house, and she would take me into this room, and she'd want to kiss. She'd take me into that room, want to kiss, and I kept saying, "We got to get back." You know, I didn't want to kiss, you know, and I had my mind on other things than football. Well, I think it was football. Anyway,
Golly.
yeah, it was probably football. And anyway, so I couldn't really take it anymore. She was just getting way too advanced for me. So I mean, I'm a lad, 16. I like the street, the girls on the street. But they had anyway, I told Tony, I got to go outside. I'm going to smoke and just wait outside. And he wasn't done with something, his coffee or I don't know, whatever he was drinking. And anyway, this gal walked me out to the door. I said goodbye to her at the door, kissed her there. She walked me out to the gate, wanted another kiss. Holy cow, by this time, I'm kissed out. I got no more kisses left. I'm kissed out. You know, I've been tapped out while I was kissed out. My lips were getting sore. And so I go to Tony's car, and it was open, and you know, that's when cars had not automatic windows, but they had to roll up windows. And so I got in the car and locked the door. And she never went back in the house, and I'll be doggone, she leaves the gate, walks to the car, and she's tapping on the window. And I think, well, maybe she's going to tell me something or something. So after a lot of taps, I rolled the window down, and she stuck her head in that window for me to kiss her. And I didn't want to do that. And I rolled the window up. Now, I didn't crush her neck, but she couldn't pull her head out. And I jumped out the other side of the car. I know it was like a mile and a half home. I ran all the way home without stopping. And I could hear her a block away squealing like a pig. Well, I don't mean a pig, but yeah, just squealing, you know. But anyway,
A mustache.
I was the most unpopular. I mean, there was a gang in that area that was out looking for me, you know, and her parents, God knows what her parents thought, you know, what kind of a jerk I was. And so, you know, that was an experience. And the other one, I took Rosie to prom, I had money. When I took your grandma to the prom, I had money. And these were side bets, you know, side dates. And the one in Hancock was a young lady there. Her mother owned a confectionery, and again, she's a little older. And we went to the prom, and we didn't have tuxes. Everybody else had a tux on, and they wanted to go to some fancy place, to Chase or something afterwards. And we had like $1.60 between us. So we ended up going to some bar in the basement that had a jukebox, and sometimes you just have to be honest. And Tony says, what are we going to do? Because we couldn't even buy him a drink. And I said, just keep him dancing, keep him dancing. Well, you know, the record player, someone was putting money in the jukebox. We wouldn't let him sit down. We just danced, one dance after the other. Well, my poor date, what a lovely young lady she was. But she was so dry that she had like white forming around her lips. Did you ever see someone that starts white in the corner of their eyes because they're dehydrated? And so she started walking towards the bar or something, and I come on her, let's dance another dance. She says, Norbert, I got to get something to drink. And I says, well, and she said to me, I've been wanting to ask you for the last hour or two, are you broke? And I said, yes, I am. And she says, well, I have $4. And she said, if you would have just said something, I would have gladly given you the $4, you know, to get drinks or whatever, you know. And I could have got a beer, and she could have got a Coke, and she ponied up her $4, and the other, I don't know where she pulled it out of, but she had $4 somewhere on her, and but I didn't care. $4 was $4, and I think the other gal pulled $2 out or something, so we had $6. We ended up having a ball till like, you know, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. But I learned a lesson then that sometimes, you know, you just need to be honest to the person you're with. And if we would have just explained our situation to them, because we had a great time. I never took her out again because I was always, you know, ashamed of not being more honest with her.
So you could just like dance with people and do stuff like that, and it wasn't like.
Yeah,
It was just fun.
yeah, it was fun. It was fun dancing. It was really fun.
And you were just
all
pretty
the
good
old
at it.
tunes, the tunes of the, I still think the tunes of the '50s are, that you hear them all the time now. When you
All that
hear
Motown stuff?
the '50s, the '60s, and then I think it was the best music, dance music that ever, that had a beat, and the lyrics had, they were either silly lyrics or they were love lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really meaningful songs. There was some thought into when Nat King Cole and, yeah, when he would sing, or Brooks Benton, or Addie Page, or Brenda Starr, and Frankie Lane, and I could go on and on and on.
So you went to the dances a lot, and then you went to those Teen Town things a lot too?
Yeah, we went to Teen Town all the time. And it was like you could be like a social butterfly there, because the girls lined up on one side, the guys on the other, and it's all you needed was just a little boldness just to walk over. And, you're not pairing off, you're not looking for boyfriend, girlfriend, but if the person you picked danced your style, or you were comfortable dancing each other, then you'd see them at other dances, and you'd dance with them once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
But we did that even when Dolly and I would go to dances. We would dance with other people.
Oh.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's not like we were cut off from the rest of, the young people. So that's pretty well it. And then, of course, the Corps was quite an experience. And I got to say, I saw so much, it did so much, I don't want to go into a lot of it. And but that's when I was exposed, to God's Son Jesus in high school, as to who He was. But I'm telling you, in the Marine Corps, I learned in a hurry. You can be way over your head in most things they ask you to do. You don't see how you can even do them, or could do them, but that's what you're trained for, and you could. They taught you in the Corps, when you say, I can't go another 5 miles, you can go another 10 miles if someone's after you, trying to kill you,
Mm-hmm.
So our trainers all had been through this, so they pushed you beyond limits that you could possibly think. And that's nothing new, because the human body can always do, like a lot of times you say, man, I can't take another step, I'm tired. Well, if your life depended on it, you would take a lot more steps.
Did you join the Corps with any of your friends, or was it just you?
No, I just went by myself.
So
Yeah.
did you meet Pete Peters in high school, but then you guys...
Yeah, well, Pete and I, we married sisters ultimately, but Pete, when we were sophomores, there was a dance coming up at CBC, and I was taking Dolly, and Pete didn't have a date. He broke up with a gal, some lady, girl, or whatever, and so he took Madeline to that dance, to the CBC dance. We went together, and Jerry's dad had a car, so that kind of helped that he'd get the car once in a while, not like kids.
And what rank did he graduate with from CBC?
Well, Jerry was about 3 weeks before graduation. I really got Pete, God bless him, expelled from school about 3 weeks before graduation, and he wasn't going to get to graduate. At least that's what they told him, because they started a bud fight, and they don't allow that stuff. It'd be like throwing food in a cafeteria. This was outside, and Pete had mud on him, and my other friends had mud on him, but I was a little bit of the instigator, so I was able to drop the stick that I threw the mud with and get in through the back door. So I got into class and I was unscathed. And we all set each other up more than once or twice. So if you happened to get caught, even if you weren't guilty, you just kept your mouth shut. And, you didn't,
Yeah.
I mean, because that was just one thing I got by with, but a lot of times they got by with a lot of stuff and I took the heat, So, but he had mud on him, so anybody with mud on him was evidently in his bud fight. But his dad, but he didn't get to graduate, but right before graduation, they promoted him to private first class, and he tried to turn the stripe down, but they made him take it, and but he broke the ranks of the 10 privates to PFC. But that's as low as you can go. I mean, freshmen make PFC and corporal and...
All right. So I think we'll stop here
Yeah.
and we'll do the core on the next shift.
All right.
But my mom has a special request for you to tell me the story about with you and Mr. Sessions.
Oh man, that's the one I skipped.
She wants it. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Well, I mean, I really didn't do anything, and I'm pure as snow on that. Well, I remember I was young in the 8th grade, and it was a summer night, and my mother had rules, and rules were rules, and I broke them. And like I say, there's consequences to breaking rules, and I think what I see sometimes of just reading the paper, and nobody wants consequences for screwing up. It's just always a reason why, but I had a curfew at 9:30 from the streets, and a lot of times I missed curfew. I mean, I just wouldn't make it home in time.
That's early.
So 9:30, maybe on weekend might be 10 o'clock, other than when I was dating when I got older. I'm talking about grade school. And if I wasn't home by 9:30 or 10 o'clock, whatever time it was, I mean, the door was locked, and even if it was school the next day, there's no getting into the house. So I slept on the back porch, and if it was cold, I had not like I was in a cold, but I could open the outer door, and the second floor went up some steps, and we lived on the first floor. So I had steps there, so it wasn't like I was out in the freezing rain or snow. But many nights I'd spend my time on the back porch or the front porch. And then Mother would unlock the door at 6 a.m. when I had to go to work to do this box lunch stuff and get ready for Mass. And I get to wash up and get ready, and my day went on, and the next night I just had to be, if I wanted to get in my bed, that's what I had to do. Well, I was really late one night, and I just said, well, hell, I'm this late, I might as well be really late. So I was still probably on the street, 11 o'clock, 10:30, and I'm on 10th and by the Boys Club, where the old Boys Club is now. That was a brewery and caves over there at the time. And I'm standing on the corner, and I'm by myself, thinking about going home. But anyway, a guy, John Sessions, who lived probably closer to Dolly, and anyway, he went to, he was 2 years older. He was a sophomore at McKinley High School. But John had a little bit of a shady past, and he went to Humboldt School. Anyway, he pulls over with a car, and he opens the door, he says, Butz, get in. So like a stupid idiot, I get in this car. And we're driving, and we're getting down around Ralston Perina, which is out of our neighborhood, down on Lafayette, Ralston Perina, where it is. And there was a MacArthur bridge that went over. There was a bridge that went over to Illinois at the time. And there was a group of cities over there called Brooklyn, Lovejoy, Venice. And it was called the Valley, and that's where Afro-American or black prostitution was. And so John was a little active, and I said, John, where are we going? He says, well, you're going to go over to the Valley with me. And I'd only heard about the Valley. Little kids hear stories, And I said, oh my God. He said, where you're going? And then I said, well, whose car is this? He says, well, I stole it. So now I'm in a stolen car going over to the Valley, which is a place that it's spooky. I mean, there's not even paved street. There's just black charcoal street, asphalt, and I mean, derelict, poor-looking things, and we pull into this place, and it starts to rain, and I mean, this house, this two-story house, just a light bulb hanging from a fixture with torn, not even curtains, torn shades, nasty looking, and it was a bordello, and
I'm gonna have to go in your tape.
so anyway, he says, "Come on." He had $4, and he told me, something was I was going to have my first experience, and I was scared. I mean, I told you before about God. I knew God was really going to get me for even being there, much less doing anything, going any further with this thing. And I remember this kind of heavy-set Afro-American woman coming down the steps, and John met her, and he went upstairs, and then this other big mama come out, and she said, "Will you come with me?" And I said, "I can't go with you." And she said, "Yes, you are." And I said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "I've been paid." I said, "I don't care." But they had one of those, in the old days, we had a Coke machine like this that was about 4 or 5 times that size, but it wasn't, there was no electricity, so it was just like 2 handles on the end of a big Coke machine that you raised up, and there was soda in there with cold water or ice, or that's what kept your, there was no refrigeration. And I remember she grabbed me, and there was like several times that size, and they had handlebars on it, like a big bar, and I grabbed that bar, and I mean, them fish, she could have cut my wrist off, and I still wouldn't let go of that box. And this woman is dragging me, pulling this box. There's very little furniture, a couple shady lamps and an old couch in there, and pulling me around this hardwood, this floor, nasty floor. But she's old. I don't know how old she was. I don't even remember. She's a big mama, and she had a hold on my waist and pulling me, and she couldn't pull me loose from this. And I said, "God, I can't let go, And so finally she got me under a light bulb, but she was getting out of breath, from tussling with me and moving me in this box all the way around this living room. And she got me under a light bulb, and she started cackling. She, "Oh, hi," he said, "Why, you're just a baby." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm just a baby, and I really want to go home to my mother." That's what I told her. I really just want to hold on here and go and wait for John and go home to my mother. So she turned me loose. She didn't accost me or, hurt me or anything else. She turned me loose, kept the $2, and anyway, John came down the steps, I don't know, sometime later, and now we had to get into this car, and but a big thunderstorm had come about. And we were on, it was not asphalt, it was cinders. It was black cinder streets with big potholes in it. And in the days, this was an old car where the side went up and the motor was there, and we hit a couple of those potholes that brought this black water up and got on the spark plugs, so the car died. So now we're in the middle, we got to get the water in the streets up to the running board. So now with clothes on, we got to get out of this car with our shoes and trousers, climb up there, and we both got cigarette lighters, and literally why we didn't blow each other up, I don't know. We're blowing, and we got to get these spark plugs dry to get the car started to get out of there. We were stuck there for a long time, like maybe half hour, an hour, and finally got the car started when those plugs dried out. And anyway, by this time it's like 2 o'clock in the morning now. I gotta serve mass the next morning at 6, 7 o'clock mass. And when John pulls on 10th Street, there's a squad car in front of my house, a police car from Lynch Street. And so John says, "Okay, get out of the car. I'm gonna go ditch it." And he says, "But I'm gonna tell you," he said, "if you squeal on me," he said, I'm gonna do you under." He said, I didn't know if he would or not, but he said, "Yeah, I'll get you." He said, "Whatever you do, don't squeal." Well, we had a code, and you didn't squeal. I mean, you took the heat, and I remember going home. Now I looked like hell. I was covered with black soot from head to toe, and cops in those days. It was a big sergeant was in there with another officer, and my mother and my sister was up, and of all people, Mary Mitchell, my mother's friend, Mary Mitchell. Evidently, my mother checked the back porch, or the porch, and I wasn't there like at midnight or 1 o'clock, and called the police. And the police responded. They were out looking for me. Well, they demanded to know. My mother was hysterical. I looked terrible. And there's no way that I could spill one word of anything that happened. But in those days, if an officer, a policeman asked you a question, and you're a young punk, you had better answer them and say, sir, and I dummied up. I remember my mother started hitting me with a coat hanger, and the cop had me by the neck, and he said, oh, well, we'll take him into the station and he'll talk. Well, thank God Mary and my mother said, no, they wouldn't let him take me, because I'm sure they could have squeezed it out of me if they'd have got me to the police station. But frankly, I was in a lot of trouble, and I never did tell where I was. And my mother died without me ever telling her what happened that evening. She'd have been mortified. She would have been, now, and I also thank God, because as I told you many times in my life, I was exposed to a situation, and like God would just always, like, somehow in unbelievable circumstances, just hold it there and get me out of it, you know, not without consequences, but, you know, get me out of it, you know. And but anyway, that was quite an adventure, I tell you. At 13 years old, or being in grade school yet. So I anyway, that was my story of my Bardello. Mary Mitchell, by the way, Mary Mitchell, about when I got to be about 30 years old, she always wanted to know, you know, and I could talk to Mary, and she wouldn't feel betrayed, like when my mother would feel betrayed, because she idolized my every move, and, you know, at least the one she knew about. And so I did tell Mary, and Mary died without ever telling my mother. My mother died, and so it was always something between Mary and I that we had this little.
That you was just a baby.
Why, you're just a baby. Yes, ma'am, I is, and I want to go home to my mama. That's a pretty good line, though, isn't it?
That's good.
I mean, what mother could deny another mother?
Exactly. All right.
But God saved me again.
So there it is. The completion of phase 1 of the documentary.
The only thing that I would have liked to have said about my father, he wouldn't be a father like your dad, you know, like with being involved in your life, but I would see him every week, and that was my job. He gave $7 a week, no, $15 a week, $1 for my mother, and the divorce. My mother got $1 a week, $52 a year, big deal. And my sister and I got $7. But we got that from the time we were like in grade school, even through high school. But he never, ever once gave more than that, you know. My father never saw me in 4 years play football. But if my name wasn't mentioned, like in the paper or the starting lineup, or I did something, you know, he'd say, I didn't see your name, you know. Because he was real proud of it if he saw it, you know. I'm not saying I would have headlines or nothing like that. But he worked on Friday, Saturday. Bakers, that's when they work, and he was never off. And then his off time was, his whole life was in bars, you know, playing cards, and all of his friends were there, and he liked his beer. But he wasn't a drunk, but he just drank a lot of beer. So we never did things together. I remember going to a ball game with him. I took him to the All-Star game when I got older, and he did take me to a Brownie game or two with Oscar, the Indian, and Uncle Fred. That was before my mother threw the iron at Fred. But I think what was important was not, I mean, he wasn't there as a father, but I always knew that he loved me, you know. He really did. I have to look for him, I'd have to find him, but he was always glad to see me. Now sometimes if the cards weren't going right, I knew that you had to back off a little bit, you know, that's not the time. Like if they're in the middle of a card game, you don't want to start talking about high school or something, you know. But the lesson I learned there is that love in Corinthians, they give you this whole thing about the gifts of, the gifts of tongues, the gift of teaching, the gift of this and the gift of that. But the greatest of these is love. So, by my knowing and feeling that he loved me, that's where it's the greatest, So you can fail someone, you can disappoint someone, but if they I mean, that was a blessing. It was a real blessing. Yeah. And
Just because he wasn't around, but still.
yeah, but I saw him.
It counted so
I
much
saw
when
him.
it
It
was
was my job was to go get the $15 every week, So I'd have to wait for him. He'd take me to the tavern. What was bad about it is my dad, nickels and dimes were, you had to save them and all that. And a lot of times I'd ask my mother for a nickel or dime to go to the show or buy an ice cream, and she said, no, we can't afford it. And I had to learn to live with that, although a lot of times I didn't quite understand it, because my dad, unfortunately, would give me a quarter that was just for me. He would give my sister one. They never had that much of a rapport. But he'd give me a quarter. Well, a quarter was like 5 ice cream cones. A quarter was into the movies with candy and popcorn, And so what I had to learn was that quarter, I was blinded by it a lot of times because it could buy me what I wanted. But it was my mother who was working, like a slave at a dress factory and raising 2 children without a husband. You know what I mean? And so you have to see the difference there, I still appreciated the quarter, but I'd always say, well, I'd think to myself, well, my mom won't give me a dime, but dad gave me a quarter. But that's how a kid would think, So I had that when I got older, I could see that quarter was a token thing. It's easy to throw someone a quarter, but to cook for them, to wash for them, and to get them up for school and work 40, 50 hours a week, that's a much better deal. I mean, a much stronger thing.
So he wasn't so good at that kind of love, but
Well,
just came in a different way.
yeah, but he always hugged me, he always kissed me, and I think that's where I'm probably more of a hugger and kisser than most people. I mean,
Just because you know how much it means.
I like touching, I like feeling, because there was in my youth a great separation. That's another really bad thing that I have. I mean, I got some serious issues, I guess, that comes out of some kind of an environment. Like I don't receive gifts very well, but I never remember my father ever giving me a gift, like for Christmas, birthday, whatever. I don't even know if he remembered it was my birthday, and I don't want to get into that because that doesn't take away.
It's not important anymore.
It's no big deal. But there was times I think I would have really enjoyed a gift or something. I don't know if I would have or not, but in your fantasy, you have a lot of fantasy going on in your life where the way you think things should be, the way you think they're going to go, and this and that. But so I know Dolly always says, like, I don't need another shirt. So if someone gives me a shirt, it's almost meaningless. But if somebody does something a little bit for me, or like
Kathy, or when you get good, like whenever Mike get those pickles, and when Mike gave you all those Tupperwares for your stew.
Oh yeah,
like,
see now that's something that it could be 15 cents or $5, but that jar of pickles in those containers, yeah, that's the kind of I really do appreciate that kind of gift, or even somebody just doing something, or just a little lunch or something. I don't need things. I'm not too gracious at all accepting things. you know. I don't know why, they're just, I mean, that's the same way with, I've always, even with the kids now, they make more money than I do, I still pick up, if we go to lunch, I try to always pick up the bill. I just automatically do that because I want to do it, for number one. But if someone wants to pick up the bill, I sometimes am not the most gracious person to say, you know, I don't know, I don't want to go on there. But anyway, but, and then for the grandchildren, I really do enjoy my grandchildren. I really do enjoy my grandchildren. You're all so unique. And some of you, I pray a lot that you not stay in one church or do this or do that, or, you know, like I would do or choose to do, or what's comfortable for me. But I would like each of you not to even have your father's faith or your mother's faith. You can't, that could be a guide or a lead, but you've got to develop your own. It's a personal relationship that you all have to find, rather than, well, I'm Catholic because my parents are Catholic, or I'm this because I don't do this because my mother or dad never did that. You know what I mean? I think if the prayer I pray for each of you is that you, because I tell you, life can be tough at times, and you need something more than what you just see and feel, because your feelings may not even be, that's just the way you feel today, you know, it's an emotional thing. So you can't really go totally on your feelings, but they're part of your physical makeup. And so feelings are very important, but you got to know that you know that you know that you know. And it's a faith thing, you know. And that's what I pray to each of you, because when times, good times are bad times, that you think Him and you thank God both ways. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like that footprints in the sand, you know, I'm going to walk with you, I'm going to take you here and there. Well, then, well, Jesus, where were you? Mm-hmm. And only one set of prints. Well, that's when I was carrying you. You got, you know. And and like a couple staying together, unless you're yoked and you bring God into that relationship, I don't see how much it's possible. And that's why the failures are so great. Mm-hmm. You know, there's got to be some. It's the glue that holds you together. I mean, when everything's going beautiful, it's beautiful, you know? And so then sometimes we think, well, we don't need it because it's going too good. But then how do you react when, you know, the relationship breaks, or a person dies, or, you know, mm-hmm. you know? That's where it's an inner thing, it's a personal thing, rather than... Anyway, that would be my prayer for all of my grandchildren, that they search and find and seek, and you know, the rules of the church are, I mean, nobody likes to bow to authority. That's another thing. I think at times a church should preach out against abortion. They should preach out against inhumane things. They should stand up and speak. But you know, some of the man-made little, you know, to get caught up in those is silly.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That was a good first day.
You don't have none of that on tape.
We laughed, we cried.
Well, I got choked up thinking about my dad, that's all.
Well, yeah, it's your parents. Created a good thing.
Gee.
It's going to be intense. You didn't know it was going to be this intense, did you?
Gee.